So before we start the wrestling thing, I have one question for RJ. When you guys first started the Refin It Up podcast, it was just you and Brian, right?
Yeah, it was, we went, with Brian and myself. We kind of just did our own little thing. Just pretty much how we started was, I'd go back and I literally watched every single, WWE SmackDown, every WWE pay-per-view to try to see what matches he was reffing because there's no database
Right.
out there that I
There's
found.
no
Maybe there is and I haven't found it. Well, not for referees, they don't, unfortunately.
They get no love.
So, I'm sorry?
I said they get no love. You know, whenever there's a mistake, they're going to get blamed for it when they do their job.
Oh, they get blamed for it.
Exactly.
It's like being married. But I kid. My wife's upstairs. She like has like ESP or something. She'll strike down with great vengeance or something. No, we started with that and we were doing shows. I think our first episode we did was on Sting and we talked about in our second segment because we didn't have Sting on the first probably handful of episodes. We didn't have guests on. Because we want to get our feet wet. Right. I want to get Brian, because up until probably, peek behind the curtain, up until the last probably year and a half, Brian was using his phone to podcast, and I was basically recording it on my end. So he was not Mr. Technology, and I understand that and respect that. So, but anyways, I digress. And, he was the referee during the whole Jeff Hardy debacle with Sting, when he showed up drunk or high or under the influence, we'll say. So it goes back to telling those stories, about these matches, about these talented wrestlers that, have these great events. And then probably within, a few episodes, we said, hey, why don't we reach out to a couple wrestlers and, just see, if they want to come on. Obviously, a lot of these guys have so much respect for Brian, and for the Hebner name that is. So I'm trying to go back and look and see who our first guys, because, being 3 years, I'm like, I barely remember what I, had for breakfast this morning. We've had on, let's see here. I think our first episode that we actually had a guest on was James Storm, and that was back in, April of 22. And that was actually, believe it or not, during that episode, it was a funnier story. He is actually doing the show from his garage during a tornado in Nashville. Wow. And, you could hear the thunderstorm or the thunder and the lightning, or you can't hear the lightning, but you can see the lightning on our end and in the background. But, yeah, man, it's been one hell of a run that we've been having. I think at this point we're having, Shelly Martinez on this coming week, and this week will be our 161st episode, of the show.
Congratulations.
So thank you. Yeah, like I said, it's one of those things where it doesn't matter, and I told this to Brian and Jimmy and Daniel numerous times. I said, I could be having the worst day in the world, be in the worst mood. And we record on Tuesdays. We come on, bam, it all goes away. And, like I said, we've had everybody from Nick Aldis on. We've had, Bubba Ray. We've had Tommy Dreamer. We've had Austin Aries. We've had JBL. We have had Gerald Briscoe, Kurt Angle. I'm trying to think. We've had, Earl, Brian's dad. A lot of these great Mickey James, but, we're always looking to, a lot of the time, so people, what's your favorite episode? The next one, because I don't know what the next one's going to bring.
Yeah. And that's cool because they can give different perspectives and different stories that you can have, like the wrestlers. I'm sure, obviously, like if it's a wrestler's podcast, like Kurt Angle's podcast, let's say, the way he's going to interact with somebody that he's worked with is going to be a lot different than how they're going to interact with the referee. They're going to remember different stories or different little things, which as a hardcore wrestling fan, you can pull out a lot of good, cool stuff about that. And it really kind of covers the whole gamut of time where you're saying like Corderis was there, the 80s and all through the 90s, and then Brian came in to the WWE in the early 2000s, and then you have a current TNA ref. So you really have this whole spectrum of different time frames and what it was like when they were getting started, or what it was like recently, and what they can relate to differences, or who they've worked with still that's still working. Because obviously people are still, John Cena is still out there, for crying out loud.
Right. Well, and that's somebody that Jimmy and Brian have both worked with.
Right.
And actually, Brian has actually traveled with John Cena before he, really got started back there, in, I believe '03 there. But, funny story, side note on that. There was I forgot what episode we talked. It was probably on the John Cena episode that we did. And, Brian went into great detail about he was supposed to be, you go back and famous beatboxing with Brian Hebner with Kurt Angle and John Cena. And at one point, he was there was a storyline gonna happen and proposed that, Brian was going to be, the guy that would beatbox John Cena to the ring every match. And Undertaker actually went to Brian and said, don't do it, because you can't go back from that. You can't go back to reffing after that. And luckily enough, he never did that, because, he was still reffing, until, 2023, when he retired in, the summer of 23.
Yeah.
Undertaker with good advice, huh?
Yeah. I was just thinking, like, if you're not looking
Imagine
to
that.
become like not a valet, but like a manager, or something like that, and parlay that into the next level of your career, it was just going to be a one-time thing. Undertaker was smart to do that, because you can't just go back to being a regular referee from that point. That doesn't really work.
Well, and you grew up in the business like he did with his dad and his uncle